If you wanted to build the most intimidating fighter jet of the Cold War, you'd give it wings that move, a radar that sees farther than anything else in the sky, and missiles that could destroy enemies before they even realized they were being hunted. The crazy part? America actually built that jet, and for more than 30 years, this machine didn't just defend aircraft carriers, it changed naval aviation forever. This is the story of the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, the fighter that rewrote the rulebook. If you love deep dives like this one, hit like to tell YouTube you want more military aviation breakdowns. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat is one of the most recognizable fighter jets in aviation history. At first glance, it's a sleek, predatory shape with swept wings and twin tails that look like they belong on a creature built for attack. But behind the cinematic silhouette and Hollywood fame lies a marvel of engineering designed to solve a lethal problem. In the late 1960s, the US Navy had a nightmare scenario that kept admirals awake. Soviet bombers armed with long-range cruise missiles could launch attacks from distances well beyond the reach of existing carrier fighters. If even one bomber got close enough to fire, an entire carrier battle group, billions of dollars of hardware, and thousands of sailors could be in danger. The Navy didn't just need a fighter jet, it needed an airborne shield. Enter the F-14 Tomcat, a technological leap wrapped in titanium, jet fuel, and raw Cold War urgency. When it entered service in 1974, it wasn't simply an evolution of previous fighters, it was a completely new category of aircraft. Its wings weren't fixed, they moved. At slow speeds, the wings extended outward to give the jet more lift for carrier takeoffs and landings. At high speeds, they swept tightly back to slice through the air and push the jet beyond Mach 2. This wasn't just a design quirk, it was physics altered to fit the needs of naval aviation. But the true superpower of the Tomcat wasn't in its wings, it was in its brain. The AWG-9 radar system was decades ahead of anything else flying at the time. It could track up to 24 targets simultaneously, an almost science fiction level capability in the 1970s, and engage 6 of them at once. No other fighter on Earth could do that. When paired with the AIM-54 Phoenix missile, the jet became a long-range predator capable of hitting targets more than 100 miles away. To understand how advanced this combination was, consider a real moment from 1991. During the Gulf War, an Iraqi pilot locked on to an American F-14 with his radar, essentially announcing his intention to engage. But by the time he saw his warning light, it was already too late. The Tomcat's radar and computer had tracked him first, evaluated him as a threat, and launched a missile before the Iraqi pilot even understood he was in danger. That is not normal air combat. That is the kind of technological edge that turns the hunter into the hunted. The Tomcat wasn't just a long-range killer, it could dogfight too. With sidewinders, sparrows, a 20mm cannon, and a high-thrust twin-engine setup, the F-14 could fight at close range with any jet of its era. And because it had a 2-person crew, the workload was intelligently divided. The pilot flew the aircraft while the radar intercept officer, the RIO, handled sensors, threats, missiles, and tactical awareness. This two-human system made the F-14 uniquely powerful in complex engagements. But the early Tomcat wasn't perfect. Its TF-30 engines were notoriously temperamental at high angles of attack. Pilots had to carefully manage throttle inputs to avoid compressor stalls. Yet even with these quirks, skilled aviators learned to fly the jet aggressively, pushing it beyond what early critics believed possible. Later variants, especially the F-14D, replaced those troublesome engines with GE F-110s, turning the Tomcat into an entirely different animal, faster, more agile, and dramatically more reliable. By the 1990s, the F-14 evolved again, this time into a precision strike platform. With the LANTIRN targeting pod, the Tomcat could drop laser-guided bombs with pinpoint accuracy. In the Balkans, Afghanistan, and Iraq, the aircraft that once hunted Soviet bombers was now hunting ground targets with surgical precision. It could carry nearly 15,000 pounds of ordnance, including bombs, missiles, external fuel, and targeting pods. It wasn't just a fleet defender anymore, it was a multi-role combat machine. The F-14 Tomcat wasn't just a fighter jet, it was an ecosystem, a guardian, a symbol of American naval power, and in many ways, it set the stage for the networked-centric warfare of the 21st century. To understand why the Tomcat mattered so much, you have to understand the geopolitical climate that birthed it. The Cold War created a battlefield that stretched across hemispheres. It wasn't just about armies and nukes, it was about control of the skies and the seas. Aircraft carriers were floating pieces of national strategy, and protecting them became a matter of survival. Originally, the Pentagon tried to save money by forcing a single aircraft design for both the Air Force and Navy, the F-111. It was powerful, fast, and technologically ambitious, but it was also enormous and dangerously unsuited for carrier decks. The Navy version, the F-111B, was too heavy, too slow to respond, and simply a bad fit for naval combat. The program collapsed, and in 1968, the Navy was suddenly left with no modern interceptor. Grumman Aircraft had just 2 years to deliver a solution. 2 years to design an aircraft that could catapult naval aviation decades forward. And they did it. The F-14 Tomcat first flew in December 1970. It was everything the F-111 wasn't. Lighter, more agile, engineered for carrier operations, and built specifically for aerial combat. It combined decades of Grumman's experience with naval fighters into a single machine that could take off in tight spaces, fly long missions, and engage at extreme range. The Cold War turned the F-14 into more than just another fighter. It became a symbol of deterrence. When American carriers sailed into tense regions, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, the North Atlantic, the Tomcats were the first jets in the air. They were the tripwire, the warning, the promise: if you approach this carrier group, you won't survive the attempt. And then there was Iran. Before the 1979 revolution, Iran purchased US F-14's AWG-9 radars and Phoenix missiles. After relations collapsed, the US cut off support. Many analysts expected Iran's Tomcats to become museum pieces. They were wrong. Iran reverse-engineered parts, improvised repairs, and kept the jets alive through sheer determination and ingenuity, a testament to the fundamental soundness of Grumman's design. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iranian F-14s scored dozens of kills, maintaining air superiority even as the country struggled with sanctions and shortages. And today, more than 50 years after production began, Iran still flies them. No other American fighter of that era has a surviving foreign fleet. Perhaps the most telling detail about the F-14's significance is this. When the Navy decided to destroy the remaining stockpiles of Tomcat parts after retirement, they did so specifically to prevent them from reaching Iran. They shredded engines, crushed airframes, and dismantled entire aircraft, because the technology, even decades old, was still considered too advanced to risk falling into adversary hands. Now here's a fascinating twist in the Tomcat story that most people never hear about. The Navy almost replaced the F-14 with aircraft that would have changed naval aviation forever, but these revolutionary designs never made it past the drawing board. For all its fame, the F-14 Tomcat almost had several successors, aircraft so ambitious, so far ahead of their time that they were canceled before they ever left the drawing board. And if any one of them had flown, naval aviation today would look completely different.
Let's start with the big one. Number 1, the Naval Advanced Tactical Fighter, NATF, the Naval F-22 that never was. In the early 1990s, as the Cold War ended and the F-14 was showing its age, the Navy launched a competition called the Naval Advanced Tactical Fighter, or NATF. The idea was simple but ambitious: create a carrier-based version of the Air Force's next-generation fighters. The leading contender was the F-22N, essentially a navalized version of what would become the Air Force's F-22 Raptor. Imagine an F-22 with swing wings, reinforced landing gear, and folding control surfaces for carrier operations. On paper, it was perfect. Stealth equivalent to the F-22, super cruise capability, AWG-9 style long-range engagement, and Tomcat-like endurance. Imagine a stealth fighter with thrust vectoring and supercruise capability operating from carrier cards. Lockheed and Grumman teamed up to design this beast, planning to add variable geometry wings, strengthen the landing gear for carrier operations, and incorporate all the modifications needed for the brutal environment of naval aviation. On paper, it was a monster. All the F-22's stealth and performance capabilities combined with the ability to launch from a carrier deck. The price tag, however, was equally monstrous. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Navy couldn't justify spending potentially billions on a program when the primary threat had just disappeared. Number 2, the A-12 Avenger II, the flying Dorito that ate its budget. This one wasn't exactly a Tomcat successor, but it was meant to replace many of the Navy's aging strike aircraft, freeing up the F-14 to specialize more heavily in long-range air dominance. The A-12 Avenger II was a bizarre, diamond-shaped stealth bomber designed for the Navy's carriers. Think of a flying Dorito made of classified composites. It was supposed to be able to slip into defended airspace unnoticed, carry precision weapons inside a stealthy bay, and stay on station for hours. But the project spiraled out of control. Costs exploded, deadlines slipped, and performance expectations kept changing. By 1991, the entire project collapsed under its own weight. The Navy lost billions and ended up with nothing but a few mock-ups and lawsuits. If the A-12 had succeeded, the Navy might have pushed the F-14 further into the air superiority role, possibly extending its life or accelerating a replacement. But wait, there's more. Grumman had their own ideas about the Tomcat's successor. Number 3. The Super Tomcat 21, the monster that could have ruled the skies. They proposed the F-14 Super Tomcat 21, which sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel. No canceled successor is more famous or more mythical than the Super Tomcat 21. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a complete transformation of the existing airframe. Think of it as the Tomcat pushed to its absolute limits. Even more powerful GE-129 engines, reduced radar cross-section, massively upgraded avionics, higher sustained speeds than any Navy fighter before or since, and it even included a thrust vectoring option that would have given it super maneuverability comparable to the F-22. Picture this: enhanced engines producing over 29,000 pounds of thrust each, active electronically scanned array radar decades before it became standard, stealth features borrowed from cutting-edge research, and improved avionics that would have kept the Tomcat relevant well into the 21st century. Grumman even designed an attack Super Tomcat variant specifically optimized for ground strikes. Here's what made the Super Tomcat 21 concept so intriguing. It would have cost a fraction of developing an entirely new aircraft. Grumman estimated they could deliver these advanced fighters for roughly half the cost of brand new designs. The Navy seriously considered it in the early 1990s, but again, the Cold War ended, budgets shrank, and the Pentagon wanted cheaper, simpler, maintainable aircraft. The Super Tomcat 21 was simply too specialized and too expensive for the new era. Some analysts argue that if it had been built, the Navy wouldn't have needed a next-generation fighter for decades, but timing, as they say, is everything. By the mid-1990s, the Navy had already committed to the McDonnell Douglas FAA-18E/F Super Hornet program. The Super Hornet wasn't as capable as the proposed Super Tomcat in raw performance, but it offered something arguably more valuable: affordability and commonality with existing Hornet infrastructure. McDonnell Douglas even threw their hat in the ring with proposals for advanced Super Hornet variants that could fulfill the fleet defense role. The political and economic realities of the post-Cold War era meant that revolutionary new aircraft programs were increasingly difficult to justify. The Super Tomcat 21 died not because it was a bad idea, but because it was an expensive idea at exactly the wrong moment in history. Number 4. The F-14D Quickstrike, a Tomcat that could have become the Navy's F-15E. This one came tantalizingly close. The F-14D Super Tomcat was already a massively upgraded version of the original jet, with new engines, new radar, and digital avionics. But Grumman proposed going even further with a variant called the F-14D Quickstrike, a true multi-role bomber fighter designed to replace both the Tomcat and older strike aircraft. It would have included conformal fuel tanks to massively increase range, expanded weapons loadouts similar to the F-15E, advanced ground attack avionics, and upgraded engines for even better performance. Pilots who saw the proposal said it would have been an F-15E with swing wings. But again, timing killed it. The Navy chose to standardize around the cheaper FAA-18 Super Hornet instead of upgrading the Tomcat family. The Quickstrike died quietly, and many believe it was the Tomcat's last chance of survival.
Number 5. The F-14X, the last attempt to save the Tomcat. When the Tomcat's retirement loomed, Grumman made a final push, an F-14X upgrade package that would modernize existing jets into near fifth-generation platforms. The F-14X would have featured new radar and sensor fusion, reduced maintenance requirements, improved reliability for carrier missions, partial stealth shaping, and higher thrust engines. In essence, it was a low-cost attempt to give the Navy a 4.5 generation Tomcat that could compete with emerging threats. But by this point, politics and logistics had already committed the Navy to the FA-18EF Super Hornet. The F-14X proposal was rejected, sealing the fate of the Tomcat line. Here's one good fact that really showcases the F-14's impact. It served as America's premier naval fighter from 1974 until 2006, a 32-year operational career. Think about how much technology evolved during that period. We went from rotary phones to smartphones, from room-sized computers to laptops, yet the Tomcat remained relevant and lethal throughout. That's because Grumman built adaptability into the design from day one. The aircraft went through multiple upgrade programs, with the F-14D variant featuring digital avionics, improved engines, and enhanced radar systems that kept it competitive well into the 21st century. Each Tomcat cost approximately $38 million in 1998 dollars, which is roughly $70 million in today's money. Expensive? Absolutely. But consider what you got for that price. A weapon system that could protect an entire carrier battle group worth billions of dollars and thousands of sailors. Meanwhile, in the US, the F-14 became a cultural icon thanks to Top Gun in 1986. The movie exaggerated plenty, as Hollywood does, but it captured one truth. The Tomcat looked incredible on camera. It became an instant cinematic legend. Top Gun turned the Tomcat into a global icon, inspiring an entire generation of pilots and cementing its place in popular culture. The F-14's cultural impact extended far beyond military circles. That sleek silhouette with swept-back wings became instantly recognizable worldwide. But the real-world Tomcat was even more impressive than Hollywood's version. It could carry a payload of nearly 15,000 pounds of ordnance, including bombs, missiles, and fuel tanks, making it not just an interceptor, but a capable strike fighter. But even legends have costs. The F-14 Tomcat represented a perfect storm of engineering excellence, operational necessity, and tactical innovation. It defended American aircraft carriers through the Cold War, the Gulf War, and the opening phases of the War on Terror. It proved that sometimes, when you need something done right, you don't compromise. You build it properly from the start. And if you do it well enough, like Grumman did with the Tomcat, you create something that remains legendary long after its final flight. Maintaining the F-14 was expensive. It required more maintenance hours per flight hour than modern jets, and spare parts grew scarce. In the 2000s, with budgets tightening and new aircraft like the FA-18EF entering service, the Navy made a difficult decision. The Tomcat would be retired. Its final flight took place in 2006. Pilots cried, ground crew saluted, aviation fans mourned. But the retirement didn't diminish its legacy. Quick reminder, subscribe if you want more videos that explain world-changing technology in plain English. We release new episodes every week. The Tomcat story isn't just about hardware, it's about moments, details, and the kind of real-world impact that only a few aircraft achieve. Start with those iconic swing wings. They weren't just visually dramatic, they were aerodynamic brilliance. At full extension, the wings provided lift at slow speeds, allowing safe carrier operations. Swept back, the jet became a high-speed dart, capable of Mach 2.3, over 1,500 miles per hour. The automatic wing sweep mechanism continuously adjusted the wings based on speed and flight profile, making the aircraft efficient across an enormous performance envelope. Then there were the glove vans, small aerodynamic surfaces that popped out on early models at high speeds to improve stability. They were later removed due to maintenance complexity, but they remain a signature detail of the early Tomcat silhouette. The cockpit dynamic was equally fascinating. Pilots and RIOs didn't just collaborate, they formed one of the tightest professional partnerships in aviation. Pilots described the jet as demanding but deeply rewarding. RIOs described their role as riding shotgun in a high-speed supercomputer. Their coordination was legendary, and many of the Tomcat's most impressive interceptions came from this synergy. The AIM-54 Phoenix missile deserves its own spotlight. Weighing 1,000 pounds and capable of Mach 5, it was the longest-range air-to-air missile in the world for decades. A single Tomcat carrying 6 Phoenix missiles could defend hundreds of miles of ocean. Even after retirement, the US government took extraordinary steps to destroy spare Phoenix components so they wouldn't reach Iran. Maintenance crews also have their own love story with the jet.
It was labor-intensive, requiring careful attention and specialized knowledge, but those who worked on it developed a fierce loyalty to the aircraft. They knew its quirks, its moods, and its mechanical heartbeat. The F-14 also proved surprisingly adaptable. With LANTIRN and upgraded avionics, it became a precision bomber in the 1990s and early 2000s. It flew missions in Iraq, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan. A jet designed to intercept Soviet bombers ended its career dropping laser-guided bombs with sniper-like accuracy. Its cost evolved as well. By the late 1990s, each Tomcat cost roughly $38 million, about $70 million in today's money. Expensive? Absolutely. But consider the value of protecting a carrier battle group, or the cost of losing one. That price tag was a bargain. And finally, there is the symbol. When people see footage of F-14s launching from carriers, afterburners glowing, wings sweeping back, they don't just see a machine. They see a message of capability, precision, and power. For decades, the world measured American naval reach by how many Tomcats were overhead. The F-14 Tomcat wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. It wasn't cheap. But it was extraordinary. It solved problems no one else could solve, performed missions no other aircraft could perform, and earned a legacy that outlives its service life. And perhaps the greatest testament is this. Even though it retired nearly 20 years ago, the Tomcat is still discussed, still studied, still admired, and still flying in one corner of the world. Very few machines earn that kind of immortality. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat changed naval aviation, not gradually, but instantly. It was the right aircraft, built at the right time, with the right capabilities. And long after its engines have cooled and its carriers have sailed on, the Tomcat remains a legend carved into the sky. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, watch the video about the F-22, B-21, or the jet that replaced the Tomcat. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe to One Good Fact. New episodes every week.